and welcome back to another Sportsnaut interview. And today we head out to Green Bay, Wisconsin to get an update on the Green Bay Packers. And to do that, we are joined by Mike Spofford, who is a senior writer for Packers.com. And Mike, we appreciate you giving us a few minutes of your time today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me.
Well, I want to start this conversation by jumping over to the defensive side of the ball for the Packers. I know it's the offense that gets a lot of the headlines for this team, but I want to ask you about the defense. One of the biggest changes that was made to this team in the offseason was the hiring of a new defensive coordinator. Matt LaFleur went out and hired his third defensive coordinator in his last 6 seasons. He brought in Jeff Hafley from Boston College, the college ranks, to replace Joe Barry. And so I want to ask you about what are the biggest changes that we should expect to see schematically with Jeff Hafley's defense?
Well, from an X's and O's standpoint, it is a switch from the 3-4 to the 4-3 as far as the base defense. But as we all know in the NFL, I mean, 80% of your snaps, if not more, are in nickel. I mean, everybody's playing 4-2-5, the vast majority of the time. So really that base switch from 3-4 to 4-3 is not really as big a deal as it was 15 years ago when the Packers had switched from a 4-3 to a 3-4 when Dom Capers was brought in as defensive coordinator back in 2009. The switch to Hafley is really LaFleur has stressed this a lot, and Hafley has stressed it as well as his defensive assistant coaches. It's really about the play style. It's about the guys up front, really penetrating, getting into the backfield, being in attack mode, as opposed to being in more of the read and react mode, which is the way the Packers have played defense for quite a while. Jeff Hafley wants his defense to be on the attack, wants to, look to force turnovers. The Packers were, toward the bottom of the league last year in takeaways defensively. And that's something they definitely want to change as well. So as much as there will be the talk about the X's and O's and officially, the outside linebackers like Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith are now technically defensive linemen or defensive ends, that's all really more semantics. The emphasis has been on the play style and the way the Packers want their defense to look in terms of its action and its attitude.
Interesting stuff there. You mentioned Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith. The Packers have invested in the first round of the drafts last couple of years with Lucas Van Ness. We mentioned Rashawn Gary already to go along with the veteran Preston Smith. I know you're talking about the style of play from this defense, wanting to maybe force more turnovers and whatnot. But is there a particular group that you think will benefit the most with the change to the 3-4, like the defensive ends?
I think it's two of them. It could be those defensive ends, just in terms of having maybe some more varieties of the packages up front in some of the different down and distance situations. It wouldn't surprise me necessarily to see Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, and Lucas Van Ness all on the field at the same time in certain situations. And not to say that kind of thing didn't happen in the past, but I think it's something that could potentially happen even more often. The other position group I would say that is really worth keeping an eye on is the safety position, because Brian Gutekunst, essentially the GM for the Packers, he essentially revamped that entire position. Really, the only safety who played any significant amount of snaps on defense for this team last year that is back this year is Anthony Johnson Jr., who was a 7th-round rookie last season from Iowa State. Brian Gutekunst went out and signed Xavier McKinney as the top safety available on the free agent market, and then he invested 3 draft picks in the position: a 2nd-rounder, Javon Bullard from Georgia, the 4th-rounder, Evan Williams from Oregon, and a 5th-rounder, Katana Oladapo from Oregon State. It's really just an overhaul of the safety position completely. The Packers want their safeties to play much more aggressively, to be that much more interchangeable in terms of who's deep and who's near the line of scrimmage. And for those safeties, particularly a guy like Bullard, who has had the experience in Kirby Smart's defense at Georgia to also play some slot cornerback as well as playing safety when you're talking about maybe a certain nickel package or the dime package when a 6 defensive back comes on the field. Having a safety play the nickel spot is certainly something that the Packers could see as well. So those are all things that are part of the transition going on with Jeff Hafley.
I'm glad you brought up the safety position alongside one of their prize free agents that they acquired, Xavier McKinney, because I know that's one of the position battles that still remains here on the defense. And you mentioned some of the guys that are involved there: Bullard, Williams, Anthony Johnson Jr., who was a rookie last year. Who seems to have the edge right now after one preseason game for that starting job?
Well, I tell you, it's awfully close, really between Bullard and Williams. And Anthony Johnson Jr.'s had his share of plays in training camp as well. I would say maybe he's, just slightly behind those other guys, but Bullard and Williams have really stood out, through 3 weeks of training camp and one preseason game so far. They're both really aggressive players. They're really heady players. They've picked up the scheme really well. Their smarts and their instincts have shown out there. Williams has really been a playmaker. He's had, I believe, 4 interceptions in practice, and then he had a forced fumble in the first preseason game in Cleveland off of a screen pass. So he's kind of been a turnover guy, which, as I mentioned before, is what the Packers are looking for. They want to turn the ball over. So far from what I've seen right now, Javon Bullard has been taking more of those snaps next to Xavier McKinney with the number 1 defense, with Evan Williams rotating in. So I would say, if you're asking me who's really ahead, I would say I'd give the slight edge right now to Javon Bullard. But both of those guys, Bullard and Williams, are taking snaps next to McKinney, and I don't think that competition is over.
All right, that'll be one that we'll have to keep a close eye on here in the final couple of preseason games. I want to go over to the offensive side of the ball. Now, a lot of young talent on that side of the ball. They go out there and they bring in a 3-down workhorse running back like Josh Jacobs. They also re-signed A.J. Dillon, one of their own, and they drafted another running back to complement those 2 guys, Marshawn Lloyd from USC. Looking at the makeup of the running back room right now, how do you see that the carries getting kind of divided amongst these 3 guys? Will Jacobs be the true lead back, or is it going to be more of like a 60-40 kind of timeshare with Dillon?
It's really hard to say right now. We haven't gotten necessarily a great look at exactly how that's going to go. My gut says that Josh Jacobs is going to be a workhorse back in this offense. Now, I mean, they don't want to wear him out. 17 games in the regular season is a lot, and the Packers are planning on playing more than 17 games, when this is all said and done. So, they aren't going to drive him into the ground, so to speak. But Josh Jacobs is clearly the number 1 running back, in this unit, and he's going to be a big part of the offense. They want to get him involved in the passing game as well, perhaps even more than he was with the Raiders. I believe with the Raiders, he averaged right around 40 receptions per season. Wouldn't be surprised if he's pushing closer to maybe that 50 reception mark in Matt LaFleur's offense here in Green Bay. How it shakes out after that, hard to say right now. I mean, A.J. Dillon is the guy who has the experience in this offense. He's proven he's had production for Matt LaFleur as that complement to Aaron Jones for a number of years. Emmanuel Wilson is a second year running back. He was an undrafted rookie a year ago. He once again is off to a great start in the preseason. He's making some noise. Unfortunately for Marshawn Lloyd, injuries have really held him back. He missed a handful of practices at the beginning of training camp because of a hip pointer. And then just as he got into the preseason game in Cleveland last Saturday night, he ended up straining a hamstring. So he's once again out of practice. So the Packers really like the talent, the ability of Lloyd, a 3rd-round draft pick out of USC, as you mentioned. But there just hasn't been enough time to really see him yet and to see where he fits in because of the injuries.
Yeah, I personally think Jacobs is a great fit for this team right now. When you talk about the young talent that's there, the young quarterback, the receivers, tight ends that are young. You bring in a guy like Jacobs. Don't forget, this was a player 2 years ago, won the rushing title in the NFL. You can hand it to him now 20, 25 times a game, take pressure off everyone else in that offense, especially in those late November, December, and playoff games in January when it gets cold, snowy, the elements play a role. You can hand it to Jacobs, and that takes a lot of pressure off some of those other players on the offense. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think, as I said, I think Josh Jacobs is going to be a big part of this offense, and I'm really curious to see just in what different ways they decide to use him. But he is, unlike Aaron Jones, he does have the just the body type of being that bell cow running back who's going to try to grind down the defense, and I think the Packers are going to look for Jacobs to do that. I mean, you mentioned it, NFL rushing champ from 2 years ago. He was first team all pro, 1,500 plus yards on the ground. He has the potential to have a major impact in this offense. And talking to his teammates, his new teammates in Green Bay about, what they've seen from him and what they like about him. Just about every guy on the offense that you ask about Josh Jacobs will say, well, I'm not sure, opposing defenses are going to be too crazy about trying to tackle him, especially in the fourth quarter, so that's kind of the mentality that is surrounding this big change in the backfield for Green Bay, and people are pretty excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I've alluded to the young group of receivers and tight ends that the Packers have. Which, if you had to pick one or even two of these guys that you think is gonna step up this year, make a jump, and lead this group going forward, which one would you say it is?
If I were to say which guy, looking statistically, so to speak, as to whose numbers might jump the most compared to last year, I'd probably say it's Jayden Reed, the second round draft pick and second year receiver out of Michigan State. The way the Packers want to get him the ball, use him in the slot, use him potentially on jet sweeps and end arounds and things like that. I think Jayden Reed could become a really, really explosive player in this offense. I think Romeo Doubs is going to be Romeo Doubs. He's sure-handed. He's reliable. He's a go-to guy for Jordan Love in a lot of situations. Christian Watson is going to be that guy that changes the way defenses defend you because they're going to be worried about the over the top and the speed, the big play down the field. And Dontavian Wicks, I mean, as supposedly the number 4 receiver, which is really they don't talk about those labels in Green Bay with these guys. But if you're talking about Wicks as the 4th guy, he's capable of doing it all. And he started to show that, towards the end of last season as well. And then in the first preseason game, he has a 65-yard touchdown on the 3rd snap of the ball game. So the Packers have a lot of guys they can turn to in a lot of different ways in this receiving core. But the guy that I think could, take that really big step in terms of, maybe ramping up the production from a year ago, it might be Jayden Reed.
Maybe a little fantasy football advice there for us. We'll have to write that one down. Certainly, maybe the receivers for the Packers aren't household names, but that could change here going into this season. I expect that to happen. Of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least bring up Jordan Love in this conversation. We all know he signed that massive 4-year, $220 million contract after that stellar second half of last season where he threw 18 touchdowns to just 1 interception in the final 8 games of the season, where the Packers went 6-2, by the way. But I'm just wondering about, now that the contract is out of the way, there's going to be added pressure there for him. I'm curious to know what you have seen from him so far in camp, in the first preseason game, that leads you to believe that what we saw in the second half of the season is the same Jordan Love we're going to see at the beginning of this season and consistently throughout the season. Are you seeing signs that are positive from Love so far in camp?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his comfort level within Matt LaFleur's offense as he's continued to grow and improve and just, learn all of the nuances and gaining more command at the line of scrimmage in terms of changing protections, going with certain can plays or audibles. all these things that, we've seen him grow and develop in that way. That being said, 18 touchdowns, 1 interception over an 8-game stretch is going to be pretty hard to repeat, no matter how well Jordan Love plays. I mean, that what he did down the stretch last year was remarkable. I mean, that was the kind of 8-game stretch early in a career. I mean, Aaron Rodgers never did that. Brett Favre never did that. I mean, so I think, people have to understand just how good that stretch was, and to say that the expectation is that he can just go out and repeat that, I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's realistic for anybody. But that being said, Jordan Love's comfort level in this offense is there, and as he and Matt LaFleur continue to work together, they get to know each other. During training camp, LaFleur has given Jordan Love allowing him to make some of the play calls when they do the 2-minute drill in practice. That's, partly designed for, LaFleur to learn in certain situations, under the gun, pressure situation. What does Jordan Love like to call? What does he like to go to? And so LaFleur is making all these mental notes while Jordan Love is running the 2-minute drill and calling his own plays. And those are the kinds of, the mind meld type of things, the meshing of the play caller and the quarterback that will help to take the entire offense forward as they go into 2024. So as difficult as that stretch last year will be to repeat, that's certainly the goal, and the Packers believe that Jordan Love is capable of it.
Yeah, he may not need to repeat it, but if he's relatively close to what we saw in the final 8 games of the season, then I think Packers fans will be very happy. And I'm excited to watch that NFC North division, the black and blue division. I think it's back. The Lions are competitive again. The Bears look like a team on the rise, and the Packers, of course, are always competitive. And who knows, with the Vikings, they got some bad news on their quarterback, JJ McCarthy, but I think that division is going to be real fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to it. But Mike Spofford, everybody, we appreciate your time, and keep up all the great work you do for Packers.com.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.